Hi, everyone. Hey, welcome back. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 13th chapter of this book. You are the happiness you seek. I love this book cover. Don't you love this book cover? It's uh it's it really captures your attention and the contents are amazing. We're looking this week at our innate happiness. And our co-host this week is Rosalind Rourke. Everyone remembers Rosalind. Hi, Rosalind.
Hi, nice to be here. Lovely.
Hey, happy to have you here. Happy to have all of you here. Thank you for joining us for our book study in this awesome book. Rosalind was just saying that she loves to suggest this book because it's just so easy to read. And so was being myself. Being myself is like simple, okay, just being myself is the essence of I am. It is the essential self. And I'm happy to have just awesome co hosts and dedicated book study companions here to share this. I get emails all the time, people that are just they're just so enlivened by this book study experience. And I don't know what our next book is or even when it is, but this has been a really great one. And I think we should get started. Rosalind, we're looking on page, let's see, 99.
Just before we get started, Bill, have you mentioned that Rupert reads this book? It's available for him to read on audio, but it's not from Audible. You have to buy it on his website. Have you mentioned
No,
that before?
I haven't. No, but you are right now.
Yeah, it's so
And
fun if you like to hear it again. I don't think it replaces seeing the words on the page, but in addition, I love it. It's really fun. So
do you listen and read at the same time?
if I want to underline but I usually, for him, I usually do it separately, but it could be done any way. His words are so precious and so exact and precise that it wouldn't be enough to just get it on auditory, but both, it's really a treat. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Rupert's a treat. He's such a cool guy. You know, he's just a regular guy. I interviewed him for a podcast on Friday, and, you know, just the two of us. And prior to the recorder coming on, he's just a guy. You know, he's just a guy who has this gift. He has this gift of just as you said, precise languaging and understanding and clarity of something that didn't used to be so clear. And because of his clarity, we capture the same understanding and then we share it in our own style, our own voice, our own vocabulary, and it's just and it's catching fire. People are catching fire of these the simplicity of living an awakened life, living the clarity and the understanding of I am presence, and what all these things mean. Last book was being myself, just being yourself, and learning what that entails, and then you are the happiness you seek, and it's unpacking and looking through a prism of many facets of the ways it can be seen, and through the seeing and the words that are shared in his book, we actually have a direct experience. We have many direct experiences from the understanding that comes in as we speak of these things that he just, you know, he just brings it so easily. So let's look at page 99. our innate happiness. Rosalind, where would you like to start?
Start with the quote on the top, because at first it scrambled my brains. I didn't get it at first. And then it became deeper and deeper as I let it sit inside me. Thus the master travels all day without leaving home. However splendid the views, she steps serenely in herself. And the biggest takeaway for me when I finally had an interpretation of what this means is that we can travel and bring the real I, the real self with us, no matter what the scenery, no matter how splendid the view. And it all is splendid, even if we stay home, because we bring the I, and there it is no more happiness than that I.
Yeah. And also, it's distinguished that it's the master, the master of consciousness of I am, not Bill the bodysuit or Rosalind the bodysuit. It's the I am presence is the master, travels all day without leaving home. It's actually traveling in this bodysuit, embodied in the experience and through the understanding that Bill the bodysuit seems to have, that consciousness has embodied through him. It's that movement and that traveling of consciousness that knows itself.
Yes, yes.
And then the next line, however splendid the views, no matter how much, how beautiful the objects of experience that Bill or Rosalind or Freddie or Susan has, she stays serenely in herself or itself. And it's just, oh my God, it's right here. It's I am.
Yeah, so beautiful. And the next sentence, the title, happiness is always the same. That blew my mind in its brilliance. I have never thought of that. You get the car, you get the house, you get the partner, you get the money, you get the job, whatever it is, it's all the same. And it's the same when it's not the objects of experience, when it's just the I am in itself, without what he says later is attraction or rejection, seeking, or it's just the nature of happiness is to be what it is. I mean, I never thought of it. It's always the same. It's so simple. It's so
Well, that's because most of the time we equate happiness with this emotional feeling.
Mhm.
And that emotional feeling is inspired. It's inspired by the thing that doesn't change.
Yeah.
It's inspired by the presence of I am.
Yeah.
And that essence, the Course says, and the teaching says that this experience, even when we call it bliss, we don't understand what bliss is. That sounds like exotic, extraordinary, and it's exactly like happiness.
Yeah.
Exactly like that.
Simple, very simple. And really truth is simple. What wants to make it complicated? Just the separate self. I mean, who enjoys that? On whose behalf is complication, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, almost all of the chapter, as all his chapters are great, but I understand clearly that peace and happiness is the nature of myself, but have to admit that my happiness is very much dependent on my circumstances. This is the question. When they coincide with my desires, I'm happy. When they don't, I suffer. So I feel caught between my genuine understanding and my undeniable experience. I think we've all been there in our history with this material, feeling like our understanding was one place and yet our experience was still another. And
Mhm.
that's that way until it's not.
Right. And that's I mean, the most often mentioned statement from new spiritual devotees or spiritual seekers is, I would say, in the first few years when they say, I don't know why I keep slipping back. How do I stay in alignment? Where did awareness go? You know, or things like that. And that happens. That's frustrating, and it's until it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then he goes on to say that everyone has experienced periods of happiness in their life, and in most cases, each occasion was preceded by a particular object, substance, activity, circumstance, or person. And a lot of this chapter is explaining in logic how that can't be so. And that he goes on to describe in different ages in our life, we wanted different things and we had different thoughts and we had different experiences, but what doesn't change? Do you want to go on to say what impressed you next?
Well, yeah, I like the idea that in the or the second paragraph, he says, in this way, a clear connection between happiness and the acquisition of a particular object or substance, or the experience of a particular activity, circumstance, or relationship was established early on in our lives. From this connection, we concluded, so we retained a memory, that happiness must be caused by objective experience. Even if we didn't formulate it to ourselves in these terms, this conviction would subsequently initiate and justify an endless and ultimately frustrating search for happiness in objective experience.
Yep. Yep. This is the basis of conditioning. It's the basis of our preferences and resistances. It's
And
early connections.
yes, it's the construct of the human condition that's normal.
Mhm.
It's what we think of as normal. And then the last couple of sentences says, if we look more closely, we discover that the premise of this conclusion is far from true. To begin with, we notice that in every instance of happiness, the experience of happiness itself is always the same.
Yep. And
Yeah.
following that, he says, happiness does not come in different flavors. Mind blowing. Really, just to take that in, it's so much simpler than the mind wants to make it. Like how to deal with life, even it simplifies it for me, the way he says this.
Yes.
He says that happiness is always the same experience, irrespective of its apparent cause. This observation alone should arouse our suspicion as to the causal connection between objective experience and happiness. And I love how he goes on to prove it. He doesn't just say that, he gives us all those examples of how we changed our mind. First, we loved it or someone, and then we didn't. And then how it fades, he makes the point, if it were really the object, why wouldn't it continue to make us happy? Why didn't we continue to love this thing? No, we love it when it's new, or when we love it when when it matches our mood or our seeking, and then we don't want it. And this is so universal. That's why it's so great. Everybody's had all these experiences. We can take it in and have it be our own discovery as we apply it to our lives, then it's ours. It's not just a book giving us concepts. We can take it in and say, oh, that's my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, because then it becomes permanent. It's not a concept. It's not something that you believe. It becomes an embedded understanding. Yeah.
Do you want to go over all of his proofs? I feel like we're in a law court. He goes on and makes his, it's irrefutable after.
Let's look at least one of them, okay, where on the fourth paragraph, where Rupert says, if happiness were really caused by an object, substance, activity, circumstance, or relationship, then as long as one of these were present, happiness would be experienced. Conversely, the same must be true of suffering. If the same object, situation, or person can make us happy one day and miserable the next, then none of these can itself be a cause of suffering.
And our best example, even if we've never been divorced, we have experienced other people express undying love, and then the hatred later on around the divorce. We've seen it over and over. It's common. It's commonplace,
Yeah.
So it can't be the person. It can't.
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to say welcome back, Rick. We missed you last week. I always know when you're not here because the chat is like sparse, but when you're here, it's like, welcome back. Thank you for your comments. And also, Amy, thank you for that. And Patty, appreciate your input on the chat and involvement that way. Rick said, I loved how Rupert made it very clear that neither happiness or suffering are caused by anything objective. That's what we just read. I think with a little investigation, this becomes very clear. However, due to a lifetime of training, conditioning, education, society, family, etc., it is very easily obscured, ignorance, or ignored. However, this is not a problem. You're always free to come home at any time. Yes, very good. What I've noticed I can only speak from my own experience and from people that come on making statements about their experience, but it gets the attachment to the ideas that used to be in play become less and less and less. They just don't have the same pull that they used to have, and I think it happens through osmosis of coming in agreement, knowing that the truth reveals itself and just is what it is, and somehow the consciousness impregnates that with our direct experience right here. When we take in the content and we find agreement with it, it's sort of like nourishment for the mind of awakening that thought it was separate and now knows it's not. I don't know how it works. Okay, so let's keep going. We're at the bottom of page 100, where he says, furthermore, the same event can make one person happy. He's talking about if one person, is a gardener in California and it rains in August, she will be delighted. If another is a lawn tennis player in Oxford and it rains in August, he will be miserable. The rain itself is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It has no inherent power to make us either happy or miserable. It is our inner disposition that confers on the rain the ability to cause happiness or suffering. Furthermore, okay, so then it's just really we have these are our preferences, and we want it thus. We want it this way, and our day is being spoiled by the rain or not.
And the same he does with the tennis matches. If we don't have a prior conviction or preference toward one of the people winning, then the game is completely neutral. And like he said, like his son responded when he asked, who would you like to win? He was like, the one who made the most points. Like, let's follow the rules of the game. Like, why would you have another opinion?
Right.
So it's all great proof. And for people who don't care about either tennis player, it neither makes them happy or sad. So the proof is that it's not in the objects, it's in our preferences or our resistance.
Right. Or preferences, wanting it to be a certain way, our plan.
Yeah.
And how many times a day? I mean, I'm sure no one here has their life experiences change during the day, right? Everything happens exactly to plan. Nothing ever people are on time when they're supposed to be. Everything happens exactly like it's supposed to. And so this wouldn't apply to any of us.
Very funny, Bill. But I do want to say that this chapter and the way he's talked about preferences really has made a huge opening for me, because I can't say that the work on attachment has actually helped me. I notice I'm more attached to chocolate than some other dessert, but it didn't motivate me to do anything with that attachment. So I would allow myself the preference. Let's just say chocolate, but you can put in any of your preferences. Preference to this person, preference to that thing. But the way he talks about it in this chapter, I will still probably have these automatic preferences from my conditioning, but I don't need to hold them as truth. I don't need to follow them up as a need. I can just notice them like any other thought, and maybe even closer to the thoughts that I notice that are hurtful, that I don't follow up. If I have a hurtful thought, I just let it pass. I don't pursue it. I pursue before this my preferences. I don't need to do that. Need is the opposite word. So you could say, oh, I'm getting less attached, but that attachment word never hooked me the way this does. So I'm personally very grateful.
Right. Yeah, and those words, even when we describe our experiences, even our descriptions of our experiences, they're not always correct, because we think we make decisions still. We don't. You don't choose that chocolate. There's a question from Andrew at 1223 in the chat. What is the relationship between happiness and staying present in the now?
He has a sentence in that coming up. Maybe we should read that sentence first.
All right. I would say go with it.
It says, in the absence of seeking and resisting, that is, in the absence of any impulse to escape the now, we find ourselves at one with our current experience and aligned with the flow of the universe. Now, would you continue to read the question, Bill, please?
The question is, let's see. Andrew, yeah. What is the relationship between happiness and staying present in the now?
And then he says, Andrew, we no longer separate ourselves from the totality of experience as an independently existing entity that either likes its experience and wants to hold on to it, or dislikes the experience and wants to get rid of it. As a result, our true nature of peace and happiness shines. The happiness has not been caused by anything.
Yes. Yep. And I think Jenny Beal answered it brilliantly, Andrew. I would go with her statement there. It looks perfect.
Let's
yeah.
read it. Happiness
Well,
is always
Jenny
in
said,
the
Andrew, that yes, happiness is always in the present, but you can be happy and present in the presence of thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. They don't need to obscure happiness. You can have your cake and and eat it too, and the ice cream on top.
Jenny, that is so perfect. I'm going to copy that one because you put things so well, just like Rupert does. That's beautiful.
Well, I mean, the thing I was going to say they're the same, but what Jenny does, what Jenny did in that statement, she pointed out that nothing needs to change, and you can still have that experience. You can embody, you can have a lived experience, even as the sensations flow. It's beautiful. Patty said, I am the world of experience. I am, and the world of experience can happily coexist. Yes. And Frank said on his iPhone, my understanding is that I do make choices, but as awareness and not as a body mind. Yeah, awareness is the thing that I would say it doesn't really make choices. Awareness is movement. It's the activity. It seems like choices are made, but it's just a movement. It's the activity of awareness in intuitively in mind.
It's the flow of life experienced through a bodysuit.
Right.
Oh, that's how we're connected to the flow of life. What life wants is another way of saying awareness, right?
Yeah. Well, awareness for me, awareness it's the totality of what God is, or what life is, or what is. That's awareness for me. And I think you can say different people have different descriptions for it. Mine is the absolute. And it's also that it's that subtle thing that there's it seems, and it is causal in the relative time and space experience.
Yeah, I've just found awareness works for me now. It didn't always. I didn't know what to do with that word. So for a long time, I had to find other words like life and flow and being and I am. And I just say this for other people. Find the words that work for you. They seem to change. But if they open you to the experience, then that's the right word.
Yeah. Yeah. I go back. This bodysuit is 68 years old. I used to love Popeye, and Popeye had it right. He says, I am that I am, and that's all that I am. Popeye had it. So let's look on page 102. We'll change the page to 102. And at the top of the page, what do you see on this page you want to highlight?
Well,
before we.
I would skip over the gloves, but not because it isn't great, but because I love the seeking and resistance part. Do you want to do the gloves?
He talks about the was it the hockey
Yeah,
glove?
into his
Yep.
son. Yeah.
He says if at the bottom of the page, or wait a minute, yeah, 10. In the absence of seeking, let's see, on page 101, when my son was 6 or 7 years old, I gave him a pair of goalkeeping gloves. That's right, for his birthday. He impatiently tore open the packaging, gazed at the gloves, and exclaimed, "Oh, I love getting new things." Man, don't kids do that so well? Oh my God. My wife is still like that. Without realizing it, he had intuited that it was not the gloves themselves that gave him that moment of joy. It was their newness that had the power to put an end to the state of expectation, that is, the future, and bring him directly into the present. That's where kids live, with that joy and excitement. And how do we escape the present and venture into the future? Through thought. How do we escape the present and venture into the future? Through thought. My son, the gloves temporarily, for my son, the gloves temporarily put an end to thought. And in its absence, the presence of awareness lying just behind thought and usually veiled by it was experienced, that is, it experienced itself. So there it is. There's the thing. That's the spring point, the genesis of the excitement, the wow, look, that energy that's behind it all is it's propelled by awareness, the experience of being, that then turns into an emotional experience.
Yeah. And after that, he says, believing that the object itself was the cause of happiness we previously experienced, the mind sets out in search of another such object of experience, thereby perpetuating an endless cycle of seeking and disappointment, punctuated by fleeting intervals of happiness. Does that not say it all? Have we not all? Raise your hand if you've, right, experienced this. That would be everybody, right?
That's it, man. That's the matrix. That's the conditioning that occurs, and they should have this book in first grade. You know what I mean? So that these young minds are not so adaptive to false premise.
And it's kind of great that we've already had the experience to plug into all these statements to really get it. Yeah, well, kids would be, huh? It's all wonder or whatever. Yeah.
I have a sense that in 100 years, this will be so common.
ABCs, right? This
Yeah.
is
This will be so. How can it not have? This is a spiritual renaissance that we're experiencing today. This is a global spiritual renaissance, and it's catching fire.
In this way, apart from relatively brief periods of respite, most people's experience is characterized by the state of seeking and resisting. As a result, their innate peace and happiness remains for most of the time an unrealized potential. Beautiful word there, potential. Unrealized potential. So if we don't have this experience most of the time. We just have to go to our potential and turn our focus around from the outside objects of experience to what is inside that never changes. Turn it down to the background of our experience, as he lays out so well in the previous chapters, right?
Yes, yes. Let's look at Ronnie's question at 1234. It says, I experience different degrees of happiness. It can vary from mild happiness to ecstatic bliss and all the in between. So the experience of happiness, though basically the same, can feel different. Can someone please address this? Well, go ahead, Rosalind. I'm sure Jenny's typing, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would just say as a psychotherapist that feelings are on a continuum. So if it's not clear about happiness, look at your what people might say. I was frustrated, I was disappointed, but they're really all on the continuum of anger. And you don't expect your anger to all be rage. Sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it feels like ticked off. And so happiness in the worldly sense is, if we're talking about it in a feeling sense, it would be like the continuum of on any of the feelings. I think then it's clearer. But if we go to the basis that all those words I just used are all on the continuum of anger, that would be the same for happiness in the world. But I think he's talking about that causeless joy. He uses the same word for the true I, the real self, the unseparated one that just is in the flow. Because it desires nothing and it's not resisting anything, it doesn't have the highs and lows. That's what I would say. Jenny, do you have a different answer?
Jenny said, Ronnie, happiness produces sensations in the body and peace in the mind. These are side effects. They can vary in intensity. And see, Ronnie, it sounds like the definition that you've given happiness is the same definition that Rupert was saying is where happiness doesn't come in different flavors. If you go back to page 100 to the second paragraph from the top, he says happiness doesn't come from in different flavors, although it may seem to be caused by different circumstances. Happiness itself is always the same experience, irrespective of its apparent cause. This observation alone should arouse our suspicion as to the causal connection between objective experience and happiness. So the things that are occurring that seem to bring happiness in and out, that's having objective experience. You've equated happiness to the object of experience. And I think as a start, you will find that peace, this quiet presence of peace, is the first. For me, this quiet presence of peace was the first realization that I had of what true happiness is. Just this quiet presence, this I am presence. That was the first indicator for me that happiness is not in the experience in the bodysuit, but happiness, joy is it seems to come from the same essence as the peace of what we would call awareness, the peace of awareness or the peace of God.
The next section might bring some light into this also, because the questioner says, I don't want just anything. I have specific desires. And so it's also a different way speaking to the differences that people, the separate person in the world experiences. Should we go on, Bill?
Yeah, I'll read the question.
Okay.
But I don't. So this is the questioner standing up. Rupert, I don't desire just any old object, circumstance, or relationship to put an end to my dissatisfaction. My desires are very specific. If they weren't, anything or anyone would do. Alas, this is not the case. So this questioner is saying this isn't, my desires are very specific. And then Rupert says, the external circumstances seem to have the power to cause happiness. This would be what Ronnie's talking about, right? Or unhappiness only to the extent to which they coincide with the conditioned layer of likes and dislikes lying in the depths of our mind. This layer of individual preferences lies between the background of awareness and the foreground of objects and people, and constitutes a filter through which our experience is mediated. This is what Patty was saying on the chat, that it's coming through that filter. This intermediary layer of subliminal feelings is triggered by our experience of the world, and in turn triggers the activity of seeking and resisting. If our experience of the world does not activate this layer of likes and dislikes, there is no inclination in us to resist the current experience or to seek a new experience.
I think this is so brilliant. I've never heard Rupert speak of this filter as resistance and rejecting, resistance and seeking, and just having even the physical image of a filter is so useful. It's so usable. It's so, when we're going towards something or resisting, it's just easy to apply what's going on. It's this filter of conditioned beliefs and preferences and so on. And I think why I love it is that it's so neutralized. It's impersonal. It's like it happened the same way for all of us. And it actually means nothing unless we decide to follow or resist, like seek and like unless we follow the prompts, it's just another thought. And it explains a lot to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really like I mean, probably everyone here says, oh yeah, I have preferences. Fasten your seatbelt. If preferences are problematic until they're not. Preferences, I mean, but what's funny is that you don't need to stop having preferences. They stop happening.
Well, and even if they happen, we don't need to pursue them. We don't need to make them our goals. You know, we don't have goals. We just allow the thoughts to be without fighting them or even pursuing them. They can just come through. And then they stop being preferences by being allowed, by being welcomed, back to welcome.
Yeah. Well, at first, in the spiritual, I'm all spiritual. I don't have preferences. I'm not Bill. I'm this, at first, the spiritual ego really has, it has this thing that it's above all of those things. And what you find is that when the understanding really comes in, there's not a voice for that. There's not a thinking about it, all of a sudden you just recognize, well, do you want chocolate or caramel? I don't care. Whatever is good. One's as good as the other. Yeah, those preferences fall away.
But even if they don't, because I still have preferences, but now I can hold them differently. So because I'm aware that I have a strong preference to chocolate, if I got caramel, it would be fine. But I would not be denying that preference. It's still there, but it doesn't have the same effect on me.
We're saying two different things though, because the thing that has preferences is not awareness.
Right.
And
Right.
and yet the preferences don't need to change or stop. They don't have to be altered or
Right.
pushed away. They're just they're there.
Absolutely. And I was just speaking to your comment from the spiritual ego when people start and they want to be above it. I say, welcome them. Don't fight them. Don't say,
Yeah.
I need to have no.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
If I still live in the world and I have any moments of fleeting feelings of being a separate person, then those preferences might show up. And if they do, fine. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I'm just speaking from my own experience. Often, I don't cook, I don't make food, and I do TV dinners. And when Lisa is traveling, I go and buy a bunch of TV dinners. But just on a non-preference basis, Lisa will say, "Do you want this, this, or this?" And I think about what she offered, and I go, any of those will be fine.
But if we were talking about materials or cars or equipment for something that,
Yeah. Do you want this truck or that truck? Oh, yeah, I want that one. Yeah, of course.
Well, I know you well enough that food not be your subject, but
yeah, you busted me with that one. That was for sure. Yeah, good. Okay, let's keep going. Halfway down on page 103, Rupert is answering this, and he says I guess it's the last two paragraphs. He says, in relation, okay, so he talks about the football match with that his son he didn't have a preference, right? Whoever scores the most goals is who he wants to win. And then he says, in relation to the football match, my son's mind had not been conditioned with preferences. And therefore, he did not bring the past to bear on his current experience. So, this I think is important. And I think that we don't always have preferences because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Jenny says something awesome. She says, yes, Rosalind, perfect. Preferences are fine as long as you recognize they come from awareness and not from a separate me. You can see if they come from a separate me, because then happiness disappears if you can't have what you want. So,
good one.
Oh, Jenny, you're such a jewel.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Carol Mercer says, often in a moment of experience, if I pause and take a slow, deep breath, I am aware of a calm peace and quiet happiness. That's a good one. Yeah. That gets us back as presence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where are we? I've lost track of where we are on the page.
We're at the bottom of 103.
Okay.
And Rupert says the same innocent, luminous, speaking about Matthew, the same innocent, luminous intelligence was expressed from 1400 years ago by the third patriarch of Zen, Zheng I know I'm screwing this up. Zan, Sing Zan.
I
His
think
famous
I heard Rupert say it on the audio. I think he said "zing zing ming."
Zing Zing,
That's what I heard him.
Zing Zing. Okay. His famous poem, oh, Zing Zing Ming, okay, which could be translated as trusting the nature of awareness. Trusting the nature of awareness is one of the preeminent texts of the Zen Buddhist tradition. I like the sound of that. Trusting the nature of awareness. That sounds really good.
And
To
I
be
love
at peace.
adding to that the preface, the same innocent, luminous intelligence, taking that in, that we are all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the top of page 104, I think we have like 2 pages left, 1.5. To be at peace and content is not difficult for those who have no preferences. Rosalind.
Yeah.
To be at peace and content is not difficult for those who have no preferences. May it be so. Yeah, I mean, that feels good.
Yeah, it feels good. It also feels good to not be at war with any preferences. I see. I will get here faster if I just let it be, whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah. I prefer trucks. Funny.
And like Jenny said, what is it that's preferring? I love that. That changes the focus. So then that even makes what Rupert is saying true, even for me, that's still the Rosalind that still experiences preferences. If I take what Jenny says, it's awareness's preference that's pushing me to chocolate, not a separate self, because there is no separate self.
Exactly. Yeah.
So go for the chocolate.
Go for the chocolate, man. Right. When likes and dislikes are not present, everything becomes clear and simple. Make the smallest distinction, however, and you will be exiled from the realm of external happiness, which is your birthright.
Eternal, Bill, not external. Eternal.
Eternal. Eternal. Right. Sorry. If you wish to be happy and at peace, then hold no opinions for or against anyone or anything. You mean I don't care who's the president? Oh my God. To set up what you like against what you dislike is a conditioned habit of the mind. It is a recipe for misery. When we allow things to be as they are, things allow us to be as we are. And the peace and happiness that is our nature emerges effortlessly.
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to remind everybody here, do you remember before the election, Rupert was on his cell phone for 10 minutes encouraging everyone to get out and vote from UK? Was there a preference? Yes, it was an inspired preference.
But let me share just quickly about my daughter. My daughter passed away unexpectedly at age 39. And at first I went into the typical grief that you would expect. And then something happened, awareness, whatever, shook me. And I noticed in that moment, I was no longer suffering. And later on, and I've had an enormously happy life since then. Things have opened up that were not open. And at first, it was really hard for me to admit that I wasn't suffering. But would I bring her back if you asked me my opinion? Of course I would. but I was no longer in a war with what happened. All those stages of grief were resisting what happened. I didn't know why the unhappiness went away, the suffering went away, but it's because the fight stopped. Bill and I were talking about this ahead of the hour, that it's an example. So yes, I have a preference for who I'd vote for. Yes, I have a preference for Melissa being alive, but I don't go there because why would I? She's not here. So it's just not fighting with what is. It's not, can you come up with an opinion? I think that's what I'm taking from this chapter.
Yes, yes. So, and that can't come easy, Jenny. When you have a 39-year-old child that leaves this plane in the bodysuit before you do, that has to be, that's a big one to deal with. So my blessings to you and congratulations on your love and acceptance and for things exactly as they are. And I know the story of you and Melissa very well. As we did the Camino together, we talked about it a little bit, and I've heard your story is an amazing story. And also the transmission of Melissa with you and with other friends of ours. That still happens to this day. That connection that of a parent that loses a child, that has to be one of the big ones to be to surrender to that experience.
Thank you, Bill. But the reason I bring it up is not to show, oh, I had a big one, is to show that there are no big ones and no small ones. They're really all the same. Fighting, resisting brings unhappiness. And he says in this chapter, we'll get to it, that suffering is emotional suffering, psychological suffering is caused by resistance of what is. Mm-hmm. And that was my experience, that, and it wasn't like Bill and I talked about, it wasn't a doer. I didn't say, oh, I'm going to do this. There was no separate self that did it. It just was what happened. Mm. And my joining Bill and doing other speaking is a result of the push from what happened. That's right. It.
Yeah. Well, let's before we finish this last page, Jenny, would you come on the camera and explain what you mean by the differences between Rupert and Francis that you mentioned in chat, and everyone wants to know what you're talking about? You have a mic? I don't think you have a mic there. Can't unmute. No, you don't have a mic? Okay, so we'll wait for you to get your mic hooked up, and we'll keep going. At the bottom of 104, the last paragraph, Rupert says, I once heard a story of a 92-year-old woman who, when her husband of 60 years passed away, registered to move into a care home. On arrival, oh, I love this story. On arrival, she was greeted and taken to see her new room. As they entered the lift, she said to her carer, I love it. What? Inquired the carer. The room, she said. But you haven't seen it yet, the carer responded, perplexed. That has nothing to do with it, the elderly woman replied. What a great story. And that's it right there. Whatever happens, I don't mind. I'm good. Yeah.
And I love that you said, I don't mind, because that's an ancient mystical truth that many gurus and teachers have used. And that can help us right here. I don't mind is different than if you had this choice for president and that choice, which would you choose? You can choose without minding the one that gets elected.
Yes, yes, yes. I do have preferences on that one.
I know.
Just saying. So it looks like, Jenny, do you have a mic?
I'm hoping it's working. Can you hear me
yeah.
now?
Yeah, it's good. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, that's great. Sorry, I was listening in a different room with a different setup. So
right. Yeah. Well, you opened up the can of worms, so I wanted to put a lid on it. Yeah.
Yes, it was something I cleared up with Francis in Spain, because it's part of the path that I was following, and Rupert also was following at the Study Society, which is the Vedantic path. And in that path, there's a tendency to say that all of our problems come from preferences. Therefore, you need to stop having preferences. But that's really it's part of purification in a way. It's before the recognition of what you really are. And so I think in a way what Rupert is saying here when he says preferences are a problem, is if you feel that preferences belong to you, they're part of my conditioning, me as a separate self, then yes, it is a problem, because what will happen is if you don't get what you're wanting, then you'll feel unhappy. I mean, happiness is always there underneath, but it will be covered over by an annoyance. So I didn't get what I wanted. So Francis gave some very beautiful stories about, well, it would take too long to explain all the stories, but about how it's totally natural to have preferences. Some are preferences of the body, he talked about, like whether you prefer coffee or tea. Richard won't have tea. He absolutely hates it, but he loves coffee, and that's a preference of the body. But there are also preferences of the mind. So I have a preference of the mind, which is to do with mathematics and reasoning and things like that. Other people have a preference of the mind, which is more visual in nature.
Right.
So it's he said it's absolutely natural to have preferences, but the only ignorance is only present when you feel yourself to be a separate entity. And these preferences belong to me. They don't belong to me. These preferences are generated by the universe. They're generated, they appear to and do correspond to a body mind, but that's only because a body mind is a set of patterns in the activity of awareness.
Right. Well, you are not your preferences. So,
exactly.
And yet your preferences happen. So the preferences can't be any different than the thoughts.
Exactly.
You don't make your thoughts. The thoughts happen. So preferences, they're not different than that.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you're not your preferences. And yet you don't resist or try to change your preferences.
No, just allow preferences to flow. And if you can easily satisfy your preferences, then great, go ahead, have a piece of chocolate or whatever you like. If you can't, then getting angry about that situation seems to relate to a separate self.
Yes. Well, thank you for that explanation. It was awesome. Do you have anything else to say, Rosalind, before Jenny leaves?
Uh, no, it's just that it's life altering, this description. It's just like that earlier post that she shared. Who is it? On whose behalf is the preference? And
Exactly.
if you know, that clears it completely up, and then there's no fight. And then it's not even a preference anymore. You still have that movement, perhaps, but it's no longer what we think of as mine, and I got to have it. And
Yes, exactly. It's perfect. But where you are at the moment, Rosalind, it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the understanding leaves no judgment on it.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Judgment is the resistance equals suffering.
Yeah. Or guilt or blame or shame or whatever, but
All
or
of
even
those
not supposed to. Even the idea that you're not, that's like saying you're not supposed to have bad thoughts, or you're not supposed to have good thoughts, or you're not. That goes in that same group of context.
Yeah.
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 So
Good
grateful
one.
for this
All
chapter,
right.
for you, for Bill, for Jenny, for Rupert, for all of you. Really, this has been life altering. We get so grateful, if you're at all like me, for every new opening. You know, life is great. And when I receive yet another opening, I was like, I thought this was as good as it got, and yet it's better. Just the relaxation of that place of our preferences is just very exciting for me. So thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. And thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for fixing her mic. All right. Okay. And I love coffee too, and chocolate. All right. Thank you, guys. Let's keep going. We're at the top of, or very bottom of 104. To search for happiness in objective experience is fundamentally flawed. It is to court misery. One who sees this clearly withdraws their expectation and demand that people and circumstances be a source of happiness. So that's an interesting statement that he just said right there. One who sees this clearly withdraws their expectation. And I think that's done for us. I think that withdrawing the expectation, it just happens. And you know, it's like, which one do you want, chocolate or caramel? I don't care. Well, I guess when you busted me on the trucks though. Damn, I'm back there again. So funny. And it says to search for peace and happiness in objective experience is to set oneself up for failure, disappointment, and to sow the seeds of conflict in relationships. All psychological or emotional suffering arises on behalf of our resistance, and our resistance is something that rises up within us. No person or circumstance imposes suffering on us. We do it to ourselves. Happiness is what we are. Unhappiness is the activity of seeking and resisting that we do. You have anything to add to that, Rosalind?
I like the next paragraph. He adds to it, unhappiness always has a cause, namely the frustration of our expectations and the subsequent activity of seeking and resisting, whilst happiness is always causeless. This is so brilliant. In the absence of the layer of expectations. I mean, we could all do an inventory and that would bring us back home. If we have expectations, we're not coming from home. We're seeking or resisting. It's just that simple. In the absence of the layer of expectations and demands through which our experience is filtered, there's that word again, and negotiated, seeking and resisting are not triggered. That's a great word. for this whole thing of preferences. What triggers them? What's triggering them? Putting puzzle pieces together is a lot of fun. Oh, I'm preferring that because it is associated with my family. Well, we don't need to do that work, but if we know that everyone in my ancestry loved chocolate, duh, and I married someone, we have so many differences, but we sometimes just sit around with chocolate and say, thank God we both love chocolate. But
Let's see. Chocolate or sex?
chocolate.
That's funny.
Only great chocolate, though. Only great chocolate.
Right, right. Okay. Last two paragraphs. Happiness is not something that can be found, acquired, or caused. It can only be uncovered, revealed, and recognized. It is the shining of our own unconditioned being in the midst of experience. We do not need to make an effort to achieve it. On the contrary, it is the effort of seeking and resisting that veils it. It is for this reason that the sage Ash, how do you say that?
Well, what I wrote down, what Jenny could probably improve on it, but it was Ashtakara.
Vakra. Ashtavakra. Ashtavakra. Happiness belongs to that supremely lazy person for whom even blinking is too much trouble. Right. There it is. Happiness belongs to that supremely lazy person for whom even blinking is too much trouble. Okay. Well, that was fun. And Amy Habel will sign off with your last statement. I feel like if we only read this one chapter in the whole book, our lives would be changed. We would know what happiness is in truth.
I agree with you, Amy.
Yes, amen to that.
All the rest was prep, so how can we say we could do without the rest? But yay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rupert.
Well, this is great fun. Oh, listen, the conference registration is open. Lindsay, would you please put the link in the chat box for everyone? You can click on it before we close the room. If you want to register for the End of Seeking conference, this is going to be the greatest conference we've had, in my mind. The theme is great. The teachers are great. The content is going to be amazing. It's free, or you can purchase replays, but it's definitely free live all weekend, September 16th to the 18th. You can click on the link in your chat if you want to save on your browser. And then next week is Susan Telford. She'll be co-hosting next week. We had to substitute a few people, but happy to have Susan back next week. And Rosalind, you were amazing. Thank you for being our co-host today. Thank you, Rick
I would
West.
like to make a very quick plug for the conference. I have no part in the conference, so this is unauthorized. I have been to every conference. They are the most wonderful experience, and they have the best people speaking. If you can come live, it's even better. By the replays. It's such a worthwhile event. There's nothing else like it. It's the best ever.
And she doesn't work for us, so there it is.
Nothing from this.
There it is. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next week. And have an awesome rest of your week. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.